I'm John Strum, and this is Real Talk MS. It's September 7th, and we have a lot to talk about. Cognitive issues affect a majority of people living with MS, and that's why in previous episodes of the podcast, we've talked with psychologists and other experts about how to best manage cognitive dysfunction. Something that usually comes up in those conversations is the recommendation that the first step in managing cognitive issues is getting a cognitive assessment. But what's that cognitive assessment all about? Cathy Chester was diagnosed with MS in 1986, and she recently underwent a cognitive assessment. Cathy is joining me today to talk about her experience undergoing a cognitive assessment at the MS Center where she's regularly treated. We're going to take a deep dive into exploring all the details of Cathy's experience. So if you're wondering what a cognitive assessment is all about, and how it might help you, you won't want to miss our conversation. But before we get to my conversation with Cathy Chester, there are a few other things that you should know about. I think most of you know that I spent more than 20 years as a caregiver for my wife, Jean, who lived with a particularly difficult case of progressive MS. So I'm very excited to announce that next week, Thursday, September 16th to be exact, I'm launching a special 8-episode podcast series entitled The MS Caregiver Conundrum. As you might imagine, this is a podcast series that's particularly close to my heart, and this podcast, well, it's going to be a little different than Real Talk MS. In the MS Caregiver Conundrum, you'll meet some amazing MS caregivers. Some who are caring for a partner, some who are caring for a child, some who are caring for a parent with MS. And you'll also learn about some of the challenges that MS caregivers face. You'll hear about what I consider to be amazing resources for MS caregivers. And because it's me and I'm an MS activist, you'll even hear about the public policy issues that impact caregivers, as well as the state and federal legislation designed to support MS caregivers. As I hope you've come to expect on Real Talk MS, you'll hear all of this directly from the experts. Former First Lady Rosalind Carter said that there were only 4 kinds of people in the world: those who have been caregivers, those who are currently caregivers, those who will be caregivers, and those who will need a caregiver. So if you happen to see yourself in one of these 4 groups, I hope you'll check out this special 8-episode podcast series. Episode 1 premieres Thursday, September 16th. You'll be able to find the MS Caregiver Conundrum at mscaregiverconundrum.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. While we're on the subject of upcoming special events, I'll also take this opportunity to remind you that the National MS Society is hosting the virtual Black MS Experience Summit on September 22nd and 23rd. Being Black with MS carries unique challenges and experiences, from scientific and clinical differences in the disease itself to facing inequities in the healthcare system and more. The Black MS Experience is an opportunity to connect with others who understand the distinct experience of living with MS as a Black person. To learn more and register for this 2-day virtual event, please visit nationalmssociety.org/Black MS Experience, and you'll find that link in today's show notes. If you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you may have noticed that I tend to circle back to news or talk with guests about depression and MS. And I do that because I've seen firsthand how depression can bring someone to a complete stop. It can change everything. And we can talk about things like the benefits of rehabilitation, about how exercise or physical activity can improve your quality of life. But the reality is that people living with MS who are also battling depression aren't going to be lining up to do any of these things. And that includes keeping that appointment with their neurologist and even staying on their disease-modifying therapy. Depression can get in the way of engaging in your own life. So I've always given pretty serious weight to the potential effects of depression on someone who's living with MS. And the fact that about half of all the people living with MS will at some point experience clinical depression makes this a high priority issue for me as well as others. And now, newly published study results may make the subject of depression and MS a greater priority for researchers and clinicians everywhere. In this study, researchers analyzed the medical records of 12,251 people with MS and 72,572 people who didn't have MS to see who and how many of them developed vascular disease or died over a period of 10 years. And as a quick review, vascular disease is any disease that affects your circulatory system. That could include stroke, peripheral artery disease, pulmonary embolism or blood clots, and deep vein thrombosis or DVTs, among others. At the start of the study, the research team noted that 21% of the people with MS had depression, and 9% of the people without MS had depression. Once the research team adjusted for other factors that could affect the risk of death, like smoking or diabetes, they found that people with MS and depression were more than 5 times more likely to die during the next decade than people who didn't have MS and depression. And people without MS, but with depression, were nearly twice as likely to die in the next decade. When it came to the risk of developing vascular disease, after adjusting for other factors that could affect the risk of death, the research team found that people with MS and depression were more than 3 times more likely to develop vascular disease compared to the people without MS and depression. What's also interesting is that when the researchers looked at the joint effect of MS and depression, they found that the effect was greater than the effect of each individual factor alone. When combined, these two conditions have what's referred to as a synergistic effect, and this isn't the sort of synergy that anyone should strive for. Now we have some evidence that living with MS and depression can be a matter of life and death. The really good news here is that no one has to live with depression. Unlike MS, depression can be successfully treated. So if you're wondering whether those feelings you might be experiencing add up to depression, please talk to your neurologist about it. Getting a referral to a professional can really help. And the other thing about depression is that part of the effect of depression is that the person with depression may not be sufficiently motivated to even ask for help. So this is where their caregiver has to first be observant and then speak up, ask questions, and if necessary, talk with the healthcare team. It really is that important. If you'd like to review the details of this study, you'll find a link in today's show notes. For the last several months, people living with MS who are also being treated with anti-CD20 or so-called B-cell depleting disease-modifying therapies like Ocrevus, rituximab, and Kesimpta have been reasonably concerned that they may not develop a sufficient antibody response to COVID-19 after being fully vaccinated. That's why the CDC and the National MS Society's COVID-19 Vaccine Guidance Group have both recommended that people living with MS on these particular disease-modifying therapies who originally received the Pfizer or Moderna vaccine get a third vaccine dose to mount a stronger immune response to COVID-19. But there's also potentially good news about this from research scientists at Johns Hopkins University, who have been able to identify a significant T-cell response in fully vaccinated individuals who were on the anti-CD20 therapies. Now, our immune system contains both B cells and T cells, and while there may be a weak B cell response to the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines, it turns out that there's a robust T cell response. As of now, that's what we know, which is potentially good news. What scientists have yet to determine is whether this T cell response to the COVID-19 mRNA vaccines translates to protection from the COVID-19 virus. So there's definitely more work to be done here. But it's encouraging news that could mean that even people living with MS who are on those anti-CD20 disease-modifying therapies may, in fact, be better protected from getting COVID-19 than they thought they were. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't bother getting that third dose of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. Just consider it extra protection. And couldn't we all use a little of that these days? This research is so new that it hasn't yet been published. But if you'd like a sneak peek at a pre-publication version of this breakthrough research, you'll find a link in today's show notes. Large amounts of research point to the fact that disease-modifying therapies slow disease progression and, in doing so, preserve a higher quality of life for a longer period of time. But which disease-modifying therapy do you start with if you've just been diagnosed with MS? Do you and your neurologist choose a medicine that's very safe but less effective? Or do you choose one of the disease-modifying therapies that's highly effective but carries a greater risk of side effects? A newly published study from Sweden may offer some important insights to help answer this key question. Now, Sweden and Denmark have a lot in common. Similar socioeconomic systems, similar healthcare systems, but when it comes to treating MS, they share one big difference. In Denmark, the common practice is to start treatment with a safer but lower efficacy disease-modifying therapy, and then escalate to a stronger therapy when and if the current disease-modifying therapy is no longer effective. This treatment strategy is called the Escalation Strategy, and it used to be the same practice in Sweden. But about 10 years ago, the use of high-efficacy disease-modifying therapies as a first-line treatment for MS increased substantially in Sweden. Now, this treatment strategy is called the induction strategy. So a research team made up of scientists from Sweden and Denmark decided it would be worthwhile to look at how patients did after being treated with either low efficacy but low risk disease-modifying therapy or one of the high-efficacy disease-modifying therapies that carried a higher risk of side effects. Using national registries in both countries, researchers identified 2,700 people in the Swedish registry and just over 2,100 people in the Danish registry who were all diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS and had been started on a first-line disease-modifying therapy from 2013 to 2016. As expected, about 92% of the patients in Denmark had been started on a low to moderate efficacy disease-modifying therapy like Aubagio. And in Sweden, about 66% of the patients had also been started on a low to moderate efficacy DMT, but the other third of the patients in Sweden had been started on a high-efficacy disease-modifying therapy like rituximab, Tysabri, or Gilenya. And a statistical analysis of the patient data showed that after 6 months, the rate of confirmed disability progression was about 29% lower among the Swedish patients who had been started on a high-efficacy DMT. Analyzing patient data for these groups over a period of between 3 and 7 years showed further encouraging news for those Swedish patients who were started on a high-efficacy DMT. The risk of progressing to an EDSS score of 3 or higher, which would indicate moderate disability, was 24% lower among the Swedish patients who had been started on a high-efficacy disease-modifying therapy. And the risk of progressing to an EDSS score of 4 or higher, representing substantial disability, was 25% lower among the Swedish patients who had been started on a high-efficacy DMT. The research team also observed that the patients in Sweden were about 12% less likely to switch their disease-modifying therapy and 22% less likely to completely discontinue their treatment compared with the patients in Denmark. This is important evidence in support of starting someone newly diagnosed with MS on a high-efficacy disease-modifying therapy. And it's going to be interesting to compare these results with the results of large studies taking place in the United States that are looking at the very same question. So stay tuned for further news as it's announced. If you'd like to review the details of this particular study, you'll find a link in today's show notes. Researchers from Griffin Scientific and the Veterans Health Administration are working with iConquer-MS to learn about the different types of complementary and alternative medicine that are being used by people living with MS. This might include visits to acupuncturists, practices you can do on your own like yoga, and products such as herbal therapies that are not typically part of conventional healthcare. The researchers are interested in knowing what kinds of treatments or practices are currently being used, how much they cost, whether the people accessing these treatments are finding them to be helpful, and whether these complementary and alternative treatments are being incorporated along with conventional medical care into overall MS care. The study is being funded by the National MS Society, and it involves completing an online survey on the iConquer-MS website. The survey should take you between 15 and 30 minutes to complete, and anyone who's been diagnosed with MS can participate in the study, whether you use any form of complementary and alternative medicine or not. If you participate in the study, you'll be eligible to win one of 2 $100 Amazon gift cards or 30 $10 Amazon gift cards. And you'll be a part of the ongoing effort to learn more about MS. If you'd like to participate, just visit iConquerMS.org, set up a free account, log into your account, and click on the button that says View and Complete My Research Studies. You'll see a survey named Use of Complementary and Alternative Medicine in MS. Click on the survey name, and you'll be able to get started. And I'll include a link to the iConquer-MS website in today's show notes. Being a part of MS research is something that you can do for yourself that also benefits the entire MS community. Being willing to share your experiences is important. If for no other reason, then it can really help someone else realize that they aren't alone in dealing with a similar situation. My guest today is Cathy Chester. Cathy was diagnosed with MS in the 1980s, and her willingness to live transparently through her award-winning blog has helped countless others find their way through the feelings of isolation that MS can often produce. Cathy's joining me today to share her experience going through a cognitive assessment, and in a moment we'll meet my guest, Cathy Chester. Cathy Chester is a certified patient advocate, speaker, consultant, the creator of her award-winning blog, An Empowered Spirit, and in 2020, Cathy was recognized by We Go Health, the network of patient leaders, with a Lifetime Achievement Award. Cathy was diagnosed with MS in 1986, and for the past 3 decades, Cathy's mission has been to empower, educate, and inform others in the MS community to live a positive and empowered life. I'm fortunate enough to call Cathy a friend, so let me welcome you back to the podcast, Cathy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, John. I love being here in this space with you.
Cognitive issues affect a majority of people living with MS, so we talk about different aspects of cognitive dysfunction pretty regularly on the podcast. But I reached out to you after I read your social media post about having gone through a cognitive assessment. I asked you if you were open to coming onto the podcast to talk about your experience, and here you are. So I guess my initial question is, what was it that prompted you to seek a cognitive assessment?
Yeah, and that's a great place to start because actually when I was diagnosed in 86, there were no meds or no internet either. But about a year later, I was told it would be a good idea to get a baseline and get a cognitive test. So I went to the great, inimitable, wonderful Dr. Fred Foley at Holdingham Hospital here in New Jersey. And he did a full, what seemed like such a long time kind of cognitive test. And I did well. I was 28, 29 years old. And, there were no findings back then. Well, the baseline has lasted until 2021 when I decided whether it was aging or MS. I wasn't sure why I was having some difficulty with certain things with my cognition. And I know that in the community, cognitive impairment happens to between 40 and 65% of the MS population. So I spoke to my neurologist about it several times. And this was during the pandemic, actually. And I wasn't going to go anywhere to any doctors, but she had recommended when it was time to go for a neuropsych test. And I agreed. I felt like I was having difficulty processing thoughts, finding words, and just the processing of single thoughts, like somebody would give me a fact and I couldn't grab on to it. I grew up in a house where education was everything. And my parents, I think were brilliant. And they were, they encouraged us to read and do well in school and the whole 9 yards. And so for me to be experiencing these cognitive issues was alarming. So that's what first drove me to decide that I was going to get a neuropsych test.
And once you decided to do that, did you already know who to call or did you get a referral?
Well, my neurologist is part of an MS center. And so she strongly recommended the neuropsychologist who's affiliated with that center. And I did my typical research on her and found that she was highly qualified. And so with the prescription from my neurologist, I made an appointment. And honestly, I had to wait. And this could be because of the pandemic, it was backed up, but I would say about 3 months to get that appointment.
So here we are 3 months later, you go to your appointment. What was the test like? How long did it take? And what did it involve?
So the test, I remembered how long it took, and I remember how tired I was, but since I was young, I bounced back a little easier. So the test, when you walk in, I was nervous, admittedly. It takes 3 hours. Well, you're told it will take 3 hours. It actually took 2.5 hours. And it's a barrage of questions of all different kinds for memory, for recall, for focus, for concentration, for thinking skills, for all the things that affect people with MS, the brain. So you get frustrated sometimes when you can't answer something correctly. Like let's just say, for instance, there was one slide that she had all these words that said red, blue, blue, red, blue, blue, red, but you couldn't say the words. You had to say the color. Now, our instincts as children are to read the words, not to say the color of the word. So you kind of stumble over that. What that test said, I can't tell you, but maybe it was just a thinking process of some kind that they analyzed afterwards. It was a lot of tests and it was exhausting. And I don't want to say it was difficult. It was intense. But I knew it was for a higher purpose.
And how was the test executed? By that, I mean, was someone verbally asking you questions? Were you looking at things on a screen? Was it written on paper, or was it some combination? What was that like for you?
It was a combination of everything you just said. What I liked was we had our own really nice private office, just the psychologist and me, and we sat down and she explained everything in detail, what was going to be, what I could expect, what was going to happen. And she asked me if I needed any breaks in between. She was very compassionate, very kind, and I learned a lot. And we talked about the brain as well, which was fascinating. So it was on her iPad. It was on illustrations on cards that she gave me. It was verbal, back and forth of questions and answers. It was memory of just say, 3 words, repeat it back. 5 words, repeat it back. 7 words, repeat it back. Then wait 10 minutes and we do all these other exercises. Then let's go back to those words. Which ones do you remember? Which ones were not on there? It's that kind of thing. It's no rapid fire and there's no right or wrong. It just is a good solid test of what's going on in your brain. How is your cognition doing? How is it manifesting itself? And it was, and I have to say that I took a 2-hour nap when I got home.
I was about to ask you, sounds like your brain went to the gym, had quite a workout, and you had
call it the Jane Fonda workout of the brain.
All right, then. Well, I know you mentioned when you actually had your baseline assessment done. In your words, you were young, you bounced back pretty quickly. So I was curious as to whether there was any sort of a hangover this time around.
Yeah, that was my hangover. And, I'm not a good sleeper, but those 2 hours were golden. And I wish that everybody could sleep as well as I did those 2 hours. It was a true workout.
Is there anything in
the good sense of it?
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your cognitive assessment?
Well, what was nice was 2 weeks later, she had the results and we had a Zoom call about it. And she gave me the results, which I'm happy to share if you want me to. I'm an open book here. And she she gave suggestions and she wants me to have a yearly checkup, which is a great idea. Because I'm 62, I'm still young, but it is really important for everyone to go and get their cognition tests. I think everyone should get a baseline and you should follow up. It's just as important as going for your physical, in my opinion.
I appreciate your willingness to share results and your openness and transparency as you always are. I do want to respect your privacy a little bit, but maybe in more general terms, were the results surprising to you? Did you see differences from what that baseline was like almost 30 years prior?
I appreciate you wanting to protect my privacy. That's so John Strum. But, and I appreciate, thank you for that. I did see things that she said that I was surprised that I did not have a problem with. I did agree with her on the results she gave me. And I was encouraged by the suggestions that she provided on what I could do. And that included an app that could help with everybody, really, a free app. And it helps in many different ways for remediation, kind of. And so I felt good about going. I felt educated about the brain and cognition and MS, and because we're always learning, and we should always stay curious. We're always learning. Even after 34 years, I'm still learning. But I was happy with the results she gave me.
You said something at the beginning that I want to circle back to, and it really does not have anything to do with cognitive assessment, but it's something that I think is so important, yet over 200 podcast episodes in, you're the first person I've ever heard mention it. So I wonder if you wouldn't mind talking about why it's important that you did your research on seeing this particular psychologist before you went ahead and made the appointment.
Well, I think you have to understand that I came from a place when I was diagnosed where there was no internet. And I went to our local library and they had nothing on MS. And so I had no way, and I knew no one with MS. So I feel that we all need to be our own best advocates. And with that, I've had doctors that were subpar, in my opinion. And I now use the internet as my friend in that I rely on quality information, of course, but it's so important to know who you're going to know each doctor you're going to, not just a neurologist, for any doctor you're going to, for your, ophthalmologist. I mean, I go to a neuro-ophthalmologist. I didn't even know that was a specialty. And I looked her up. And if I don't feel that that they have the qualifications that I'm looking for, I'll keep looking, or that they're not affiliated with the hospitals that I know that are the top-notch hospitals, I won't go. I think that we all have to strive to find the best for us because we all deserve quality care in wherever we go and whatever we need in our lifespan with this disease. So important to rely on the quality information that you can find. That's going to be your best friend.
I couldn't have said it better, and I couldn't agree more. Cathy, as always, I appreciate your openness and transparency. By sharing your journey, you answer so many questions and help so many people who have heard about things like these cognitive assessments, these tests, but really, until right now, maybe didn't know what they involved and how important they could be. You're absolutely a living example of an empowered spirit. Thanks for talking with me today.
Thank you, John. It's always my pleasure.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society. And you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/210. You can find that link in today's show notes so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or text. Don't forget to check out my new 8-episode podcast series, the MS Caregiver Conundrum, beginning next week on September 16th. You'll find the MS Caregiver Conundrum podcast at mscaregiverconundrum.com, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts. I hope you'll plan on giving it a listen. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.